Hi, Yancy. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you clearly.
And can you see my slides?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'll try and stick to my 15 minutes. And I'll just set a little timer to do that. So my name's Adrian Stone. I'm the manager of a branch called Data Management and Integration Platforms, and that's part of the Sustainable Energy Markets Department. And we're in the Energy Directorate, and we're not the electricity utility. We're a much smaller entity in the Energy Directorate. There are two entities in there, and I like to think of us as the wart on the warthog. So we support the Energy directly, particularly around sustainability and lately on load shedding. So load shedding's really, along with, there are always benefits to crises, and one of them is it's drawn these two departments much closer together. So why did I call or have the words event horizon in my title? Well, if you really want to feel small, then go and read about event horizons on the internet. But I think what we can all understand is it's a point of no return. And I see Dr. Muladzi is going to talk on the municipal financial model later, and I hope to sort of set him up a bit and provide an introduction with my presentation. But in terms of the municipal financial model and what load shedding is doing to it, it's bringing us to that point of no return. So that's the theme of my presentation. So over the last few years, I've been involved at a local or municipal level with the problem of load shedding. I've come up with this law, which I call Statler's Law, which is basically that optimism about restoring reliable supply is inversely proportional to current load shedding, and it has no correlation with seniority and experience. I've seen very senior colleagues over the last 2 years completely go from one extreme to the other in terms of their views of what we should do, how we should respond, what risks we should take. And when load shedding is bad, we're prepared to take a lot of risk. And when it clears up, like it is now, then all of a sudden we're very aware of risk and things move more slowly. So it's a very difficult problem to deal with because our perception of it is constantly changing, no matter how experienced we are and how much we know about the industry. Municipal revenue from electricity sales is kind of key to this, this idea of the event horizon. So our finance manager likes to talk about the golden goose, and for many years it has been the golden goose of municipal finance. And it is in the process of becoming a bit of a dead duck, hopefully not permanently. There are reasons why demand would increase again. Bern spoke about decarbonization. There are a lot of drivers of increasing electricity demand there, other than the reducing factor of small-scale embedded generation. But for the last more than 10, 15 years, we've seen a solid decline in sales, and we see a decline in the electricity intensity of the economy. So the amount of electricity going to units of GDP's drops. Going up to 1.8% then. What does load shedding do to that? Well, last year it took away 15% of sales. I think it's well known that Cape Town does have some generation assets, specifically a pump storage station called Steenbras, and the sort of green share is what we managed to mitigate. So it's significant, but we still severely impacted by load shedding, and that sales problem just became a whole lot worse. So for now, electricity remains a subsidizing part of the city. That graph on the right is sort of area graph of sources of revenue for the city, and the light blue is electricity. So it's much larger than things like even property rates, and certainly a lot larger than what we get for water and waste management. So the way that we charge it is we carve it out as something called an unregulated portion, which means that we're asking NERSA not to exercise approval over it. So it's not part of the tariff approval. It seems to have been working so far. But yeah, if you multiply that 37 odd cents by 8 million kilowatt hours sold, you get 3 billion rand per annum. Up till now, if we don't make that target, they still make us pay. So that cuts into our capital reserves. But we have managed to convince corporate to gradually reduce this by 0.5% per annum. You can see our sales are actually going down by almost 1.8%, so that's insufficient. And yeah, there you can see there are big numbers in a municipal budget, and electricity is the biggest revenue at 19 billion, but of that, in this current budget, but of that we expect to pass 14 billion straight to Eskom. So if most of that 19 billion is the 14 billion from Eskom, and then our network costs, that's 2.7% of local GDP. So that's a huge amount that gets paid by our customers as an input to the economy, and then we're not really delivering reliable electricity. So that is going to cause problems. What happens? Well, people invest in their own generation, and you can see here how these are just the legal applications have just skyrocketed. And towards the end of last year, we just ran off our feet, and we can't process this many applications. We're just not set up for it. So we're frantically trying to develop an online system to try and streamline this. So I've got colleagues working very, very hard. But we peaked at 1,500 applications in a month. And you can sort of see fully in that exponential growth. If we include the illegal, we're quite lucky in Cape Town. We've got about a 50% compliance rate, which is quite good. And most of the commercial is registered. And we've probably got up to about 300 MVA, I estimated there. So most of that capacity is commercial, but you can see the real growth in the number of installations on the right is residential. And it's growing exponentially at an accelerated rate. And that's really moving things along faster than we can handle. I mean, just to sum up the problem. So how are we responding? We've got a very strong political commitment in Cape Town. So the current administration, it's a sort of flagship project, and there are 4 aspects to this. The creation of an energy strategy. The city of Cape Town likes its strategies, and so we've put in a lot of effort into an energy strategy. And obviously the program of interest here is this load shedding mitigation project, but we also need to reform the power utility. And the words we've used are to make it future fit and financially resilient. It speaks to the problem I explained. And then that work package 4 is streamlining this, not just SSCG streamlining, but also the way that we pay for it, and the way that we try and get more exports onto the grid and stimulates more exporting customers. Not all, or the minority actually of SEG, especially residential customers, export. And we get a lot of exports on Sundays and Saturdays, which is also difficult to handle. So there you can see the energy strategy, and it's interesting that right at the top there, without going into any of this, that the vision is firmly energy security. And you see carbon neutrality there, obviously also prioritized as one of the principles. And then this commitment of harnessing new energy supply, and that's controversial, and I'll touch on that briefly before I end. It's been a long time since a municipal utility expanded its generation assets, and it hasn't been done under this version of the Electricity Regulation Act, although in theory it's possible. So, and this is the sort of key issue, is this aspect of the load shedding mitigation program that wants to increase the availability of specifically dispatchable energy. So that's energy that the system operator, or network control as they're now called, can dispatch in response to load shedding. So we dispatch Steenbras, but after a few days of stage 6, the bottom dam's full. Or we can't, empty out the top dam anymore, right? So we're limited by how much we can pump in response to ongoing load shedding, and that generally means thermal power or potentially PV with battery storage. CMI is also very old, it's 40 years old. It needs R1 billion to get it back on its feet. It's got all sorts of structural problems that were actually there from the beginning. And then also another goal is to increase installed capacity more generally over time. And there's an embedded IPP program that's actually being evaluated at the moment. So hopefully an award will take place within the coming months. And then also we're about to break ground in Atlantis on our own 7 megawatt solar plant, so a much more modest capacity, but we hope to build more in Potterflay, which is in the sort of southeast of the city, and the grid is very strong there, so we can evacuate in no time network. Then there's a demand-side response program. All I'll say on that is that's much more difficult than we thought. It's a tricky thing to do. So yeah, we've sort of embarked on a tender there, and yeah, really working hard to try and close it there. But a lot of risks for the service provider. Then I think interestingly, we've done quite a bit of expansion planning studies, some modeling studies of supply and demand. It's very similar to an IRP. The CSR did 2 of those. And that purple there you can see is dispatchable generation. So that's thermal generation like Anker, very expensive in summer there. And then there's another one being funded by SAEP, where we've actually got all the Eskom plants in there to sort of model load shedding from the bottom up. I'll just briefly touch on power utility reform, just because there was the market model presentation on Friday, which some of you might have gone to. And it's something our network control, which is positioning itself to become a distribution system operator. So in other words, a system operator at a local level that dispatches distributed energy resources like large PV plants and batteries. And also kind of wants to also work with a distribution market operator. And we didn't see that in the market model currently. And a lot of questions came up about that at last week's forum. So yeah, that really needs to happen for us to be able to respond to many of these problems. So I'm going to touch on just maybe briefly to finish off. I've got 2 minutes left. It's just some of the insights from these studies, which I think are quite interesting. And just the first problem is you have to hold assets in reserve. So in order to respond to load shedding. So whether it's PV with batteries or dispatchable power, you can't run it. You've got to wait until there's load shedding. And that creates all sorts of regulatory problems and cost problems. And fuel is very volatile, but I'm maybe going to just go to this very last slide. And so we don't know how we get this past the regulator. But I think it's, traditionally the regulator would look at what we're buying and saying, well, is it cost rational? Is it lower than Eskom Megaflex? I don't think that's applicable here. It's not the right benchmark for a load shedding mitigation capacity, because it's effectively like having a diesel backup for a hospital. Eskom can't supply by definition, so they shouldn't be the benchmark. It's more the cost of backup for our customers. And of course, if we are running backup at a much higher capacity factor, that's a lot cheaper. So I worked out that it reduces levelized cost by about 30% in severe load shedding. So, and that overcomes that difference in losses. So I think there's a strong regulatory argument, but we don't know whether it would be heard, and it's a major risk for us responding. And so I'm going to finish off in the last 30 seconds just with what I thought might be needed from the scientific and research community. If I kind of read the purpose of this forum or one of its potential spin-offs correctly, I think we lack methodologies for electricity system planning at a local and regional level. We've learned a lot. We know that we need to start with the hosting capacity of the major nodes on our network. We know that network planning and expansion planning need to be very integrated. So there's the alarm. I'm just going to finish off in the last 10 seconds. But there's no blueprint. I think a lot of these methodologies, like the IRP methodology, are quite dated now. I think the measures to ensure electricity resilience at load centers, it's not just technical, but also legal and regulatory. And I think that's a good area for academic research. And this test of both technical and legal studies to support the regulator. I don't think the regulator's got a lot to draw from here. They're very much on their own, and I really sympathize with their vulnerable position in making these difficult tariff decisions. So I think, the research community can really support themselves around two issues, like, is it viable or supportable for municipal utilities to mitigate load shedding because there are centers for the economy, and pass the costs on in the tariff, and then how much should go to the tariff? And then also this issue of fixed costs, like how much can fixed costs go up? That's a major fight in the industry. So I'm going to end it there, and thanks very much.